Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? Sorry about that. We had a weird tech issue for like 2 seconds. Good to see you back again. Thursday, day 17 of some week in the trial. What week is it? Well, if you go by numbers, it's sort of like after the second week. But if you go via the weeks we've been there, it's sort of week 4. It's sort of week 4, sort of week 3. It doesn't matter, but today is day 17, and let me get this up here. Let me get set up and let's get into it. Today was another weird day. We had sort of a lot of legalities in the morning, so a lot of legal stuff going on very early in the day. And then after we got into about after the morning break, almost midday, we heard from a couple of witnesses. One of them was a nurse who had treated Erin. And one of the things we heard about this morning was a bowel chart. So apparently, we all got to read Erin's bowel movement chart, and we got we got shown it in court, and it detailed her bowel movements. I'll go into that a bit later. I think we may have some other things we can talk about other than bowel movements. But the thing that came up this afternoon, we heard from Shaman Fox Henry again, and he's a forensic analyst, and he works for VicPol. So VicPol is Victoria Police. And one of the things we heard from today was some messages that they had found on a Samsung phone, and they used the Cellbrite or Cellebrite software. So we talked about that yesterday. It's very popular in the USA. They use it quite frequently. And what Cellebrite is, there's a few different ways it works, but in its simplest form, it's a small device that you connect to a phone, a tablet, some sort of mobile device, and it comes with all different types of connections that connect to the little machine. And its entire job is to scan your phone, tablet, whatever it is, and pull as much information as it can find, including things that you have deleted. If you have factory reset the phone, it can still find documents, messages, all sorts of things. So for this one, it found some messages, right? And this is according to Miss Warren, so she's the prosecution. And it is a message between Erin and her online friends. We've heard about them at another point in the trial. And this particular thing starts on the 5th of December, 2022. Yeah, I think it's the start of their conversation. But some of the messages that is dated 20th of December, 2022. And there's a bunch of people in the chat. I'm not going to go through and name who they are, but it says here, there appears to be a message, and they say it's sent from the user. It is for the Facebook Messenger app. So we all know what Facebook Messenger is. And this is for like a multiple people group app. Okay. And they talk about what is in the body. So a body normally, in this particular case, talks about the content of a message. That is normally what the body is, not like a dead body, not like finding a body, not like chopping up a body. It's the body of a text message. And one of the messages is as follows, and this is being read out by Miss Warren. And it says, Simon's dad contacted me this morning to say that he and Gail had tried to talk to Simon about the matters I raised and to get his side, but he refused to talk about it other than to signal he disagreed with what I said. Beyond that, he won't talk about it. So Don, who is Simon's father, said they can't adjudicate if they don't know both sides, and Simon won't give his side. And she goes on to say here, so he said all he can do is ask that Simon and I get together to pray for the children. She follows on with this and says, "This family, I swear to effing God." And then another message on the 6th of December sent by Erin, and it's at 10:47 a.m. and it says, "I said to him about 50 times yesterday that I didn't want them to adjudicate. Nobody bloody listens to me. At least I know they're a lost cause." And then there's another one on the 6th of December 2022 at 10:38 a.m. again from the profile Erin, and it reads, "I wonder if they've got any capacity for self-reflection at all. I mean, clearly the fact that Simon refuses to talk about personal issues in part stems from the behavior of his parents and how they operate. According to them, they never ask him about what's going on with us, why I keep kicking him out, and why his son hates him. It's too awkward or uncomfortable or something. So that's his learned behavior. They just don't talk about this shit." And there's another one, 6th of December, 10:44 a.m. from Erin, and it reads, "No, nothing, but also more happened. Don rang me last night to say that he thought there was a solution to all this, that if Simon and I get together and try to talk and pray together." And then he also said Simon had indicated there was a solution to the financial issues if I withdrew the child support claim. And it continues, "My head nearly exploded, and I was like, what?" And Don goes, "Oh, sorry, just ignore what I said. I don't want to get involved." So, anyway, I sent a group message to them all last night saying how Simon is behaving is unconscionable. I hope I'm saying that right. And asking me to withdraw the child support claim, and how she's saying asking me to withdraw the child support claim is wrong and disadvantages me and his children. How dare he, etc. Don messaged to say that he and Gail don't want to get involved in the financial things, but just hope that we will pray for the kids. So I replied this morning saying, I understand it's uncomfortable and awkward for them, but I want to copy them into this stuff because Simon needs to be held accountable for his decisions, decisions that he is making that are hurting his children. And I would hope they care about their grandchildren enough to care what Simon is doing. That's when Don said they tried to talk to him, but he refused to talk about it. So they're staying out of it, but want us to pray together. She continues, I'm sick of this shit. I want nothing to do with them. I thought his parents would want him to do the right thing, but it seems their concerns about not wanting to feel uncomfortable and not wanting to get involved in their son's personal matters are overriding that. So F them. Then the following day, on the 7th of December 2022 at 11:20 a.m., Erin follows on and says, his parents sent me a message yesterday afternoon, and Simon sent me one last night, but I've read neither, and I don't think I will. I don't want to hear it. Simon will just be horrible and be gaslighting and abusive, and it'll ruin my day, and his parents will be more weasel words about not getting involved, so I think I'm going to just move on. I don't need anything from any of these people. Simon's parents say they don't want to take sides, but their very actions they have. And they say, she tries to give an example, and she says, if their daughter came to them laying all the same complaints about her husband that I did about Simon, they would never say to her, oh, well, we can't believe you until we hear his side right now. It's your word against his. And then she continues, no, they will just believe her. If their daughter's husband just walked away and refused to support her kids, they would have they would have things to say to him. But by refusing to hold Simon accountable or to account, they've made it clear his words mean more than mine. So that speaks volumes. Even if they claim they haven't taken sides, they've had Simon for tea every night for 3 months and never once picked up the phone to me since the separation and asked if I'm okay and need help. So that tells me their choices. Simon wants to walk away from his responsibilities too. Well, that's his choice. Maybe it's easier if he's not involved in even paying their school fees. It means I can choose their school all by myself and don't have to refer to him. If he wants them to go to a private Christian school, then he can help pay for it. If he doesn't want to help pay for it, then I don't have to send them there, do I? So maybe it just means more freedom about my choices, a blessing in disguise. So there you go. There's a huge chunk of the messages. So I'm just trying to see. Yeah, I'm not sure. All I can tell you is that this is what was presented in evidence. I can't answer any of your questions about what it means or anything like that. I can't give you my opinion on what this relates to. All I can tell you is what I've written down. So on the 7th of December at 11:23 a.m., the body of a message reads, and this time it's from a woman called Bronwyn. It must be a friend online. And it says, "Will you still go to that church?" And then the next message on the 7th of December at 11:29 a.m. from Erin reads, I haven't been to the church in months. The kids go with Simon every second Sunday and uh, come to one with me in Leongatha the other Sunday." And then the next message is the 7th of December 2022 at 11:29. The message before that was only 9 seconds. So, and it reads, "But it has nothing to do with if they see them." And she goes on to say at 11 p.m. She says, "His mum was horrified I had claimed child support. Why isn't she horrified her son is such a deadbeat that I had no choice but to claim?" And then they say here, I think that's the last one we got. Yeah, so that's the last one we got out of the text messages, Facebook messages. So they were the majority of the afternoon with our witness, Mr. Fox Henry, Sharman Fox Henry, forensic analyst at VicPol. So there you go. There you go. So I that was sort of the what everyone had been reporting on this afternoon. I noticed that as soon as this was aired in court, everyone just went boom and started reporting on it. So I tried to give you the full version of it instead of the little clippets that you get in the media or the news. So you guys heard it almost word for word, except for some of the questions in between. So that is exactly as it was said in court. So there you go. Let me see what else we have here. We also heard from a man who works at Monash City Council, and he's the guy who his job was to go around and basically investigate any Asian food store that might sell mushrooms close to the description of what Erin gave. And I'll bring you up to some of it. So we were shown his investigative documents, and it listed each place he went to across 3 different suburbs and whether he could find anything in the store that matched anything that Erin had said in relation to the mushrooms and where she might have purchased them. But in his investigation, the one thing he repeated in his evidence today is that he was unable to really find anything that matched the description of what Erin gave. He did find one store that had individual, like, repackaged mushrooms, but the store told him that they just take it from a bigger commercial bag and put it into a smaller bag because customers don't want to buy, like, 5 kilos of mushroom. So they could prove the sort of history of buying them, the manufacturer, where they got them from, and that information was requested and they did give it. But a lot of the other places they went to either didn't sell mushrooms, or if they did, they only sold them in manufacturer mass marketed packaging. So it was nothing that would be considered like homemade, or the store was sort of selling something they had grown. It was only things that came from some big factory somewhere. And the other thing they asked them was, had anyone come to the store and tried to sell you mushrooms, like ones that they had grown and they wanted to sell? Had anyone come to there and tried to do that? And every store said no. The other thing they were asked is, had you changed your supplier in the last few months? And every store said no, they had not. So it was a lot of negatives, but they were just saying, I'll give you an example. So they went to a store called Little Korea, and they said, did you ask them if they had changed suppliers since April? He said yes. And they said, what was their response? And he said it was a no. And then Miss Warren says, had anyone tried to sell them mushrooms that were not commercially produced? He says the answer is no. So you see this a lot throughout his evidence. Let me go back up in my notes and get you his details. Let's go all the way back up here. Da, 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 da. All right. So this was the witness. I'm probably going to pronounce his last name wrong, and I'm sorry about that. But his name is Troy Shonknet, and he works for city of Monash, and he's an environmental health officer. And he says, well, they ask him, are you an authorized officer under the Food Act and Public Health and Wellbeing Act? And he says that's correct. And they said, on the 1st of August 2023, was the City of Monash Public Health Unit, which are attached to? He says yes. And they say, were they contacted by the Department of Health to request assistance? He says correct. They sort of ask him who it was, and they say it was a person from the Eastern Metro Regional Health Protection Team. And she goes on to ask, you or one of your colleagues were informed of the fact that a group of people had become unwell and were in hospital. Is that right? And he says, that is correct. And Miss Warren says, the Department of Health said they were investigating the cause of the illness, and one of the foods that they may have consumed were mushrooms. And he says, that is correct. And they said, did they tell you what information they had about the mushrooms at that time? And he said, the only thing that we were told is that it was either Oakley, Clayton, or Mount Waverly. So, and that they were going to confirm later on with him. And they asked him, did they say anything about when it was said that mushrooms might have been purchased? And he said, not at that point in time. And they said, what was the health department requesting from the city of Monash? And he says, they were requesting us to attend or use our database. So all food businesses in Victoria are required to register with the council. So we have a database of those registrations to use our database to establish the Asian grocers that are in those particular suburbs, and then to attend those premises and obtain or have a look at all the mushrooms that are for sale in the premises, and to take photographs of those mushrooms, both fresh and dried. And they said, he goes on to say, they asked us to take photographs, establish the supply of those mushrooms, and if there's any mushrooms that are not in manufacturer's packaging, to have a closer look and take more photos, send those through, and then also to understand if they had, you know, established that their purchase was likely in April. So they were looking in the April period for these mushrooms. So one of the things, yeah, like I said, one of the things they asked. Yeah, let me go down here. So they ask him, what did you do next? And he says, so at that stage, I used our database to basically establish all of the potential supermarkets and any grocers that are in those areas. And then using my knowledge of the area, because I've been with the council for 10 years, I've used my knowledge of the area to sort of narrow down that these were Asian grocers or similar. And he said, and they asked, did you then essentially commence visiting each one in person? And he says, correct. And he said, did you do that with the purpose of obtaining information that you were asked to obtain? And he says, that's correct. And they said, did you prepare a spreadsheet recording your investigative notes? And he says, yes, I did. And that's what we were shown. We were shown a 14-page document which listed each area. So Oakley, Glen Waverley, and now I can't remember. Oakley, Glen Waverley, and Clayton. So yes, Oakley, Clayton, and Mount Waverley. If you're not from the area, they are all very, very close together. They're within a suburb or two. If I can show you. It doesn't show on here. Oh, yes, it does. So here you can see Mount Waverley is up here. Oakley is down here. And then Clayton is here. Clayton, Monash, around this area. And then you have Clayton South and then Clarinda and some other places. But they're very, very close. So Oakley, Mount Waverley, Clayton's here near Notting Hill. And then you have Clayton South. So they're all, not too far away from each other on this particular map. All right, here, let's go back here. I just wanted to give you a reference point. They're all within about a suburb of each other, maybe two suburbs between Oakley and like Glen Waverley or Mount Waverley. They're yeah, about 10-minute drive between all of them. They're not very far away. Junior says, take photos of God knows what. I think he just knew that to take photos of any mushrooms that were not in sort of a manufacturer packaging. That's what he was looking for. Yeah. So he said, yeah, establish the supply of the mushrooms. And if there's any mushrooms that are not in manufacturer's packaging, to take a closer look. So that's what they did. So I was telling you about this 14-page spreadsheet that they showed today to the jury. Basically, it was him walking into every shop he could find, and he visited one in Oakley that was called the Everyday Asian Supermarket, and he spoke to the managers and other staff. Sorry. And he says he walked through the premises and made observations for any mushrooms for sale. And he says, I observed quite a number of different mushrooms. All of them were in manufacturer packaging. So he didn't he didn't find anything that would fit the scope of their investigation. And he visited many different stores in each area, but each of them had a very similar outlook. Like I said, either they didn't sell anything that didn't come from a manufacturer. There was one that had a mushroom that was kind of close to what he was looking for, but it came from a big manufacturer. It was not like homemade or anything like that. So the chances of it being what he was looking for was pretty slim. So he took photos of what he could find, but yeah, he really couldn't find anything that matched what they were looking for. And he says here that he was told of further details later on. And the details were that the store where the mushrooms are said to have been purchased was in a strip mall rather than an enclosed shopping center. And they said that there was no further information that they could give him to narrow down the suburbs of interest. He was also told that the mushrooms were in a see through packet between a snack and sandwich Ziploc bag size, but not resealable, and that the label on the packet was white and like a printer label, and that the purchaser, so the person who said they had purchased these mushrooms, recalled the label had typing on it which looked individually packaged rather than mass produced and didn't believe there was a brand. And he says that is the information I received. And they said the product was said to have been labeled shiitake or porcini mushrooms, and the estimated weight of the bag was 100 grams. And he says that's correct. And yeah, so he visited a bunch of these. Like he went to one and they had only three types of mushrooms. Two were a type of mushroom that you would eat. One was shiitake, and one was a black fungi type of mushroom, quite common. And he said the other was a tea mushroom, so it wasn't relevant to the investigation. Um, yeah, so he looked through all of these stores, and really nothing really piqued his interest except for this one store. And if I can get the name, yeah. So the one he attended was called Golden Grocery, and that was on 4:01 p.m. on the 2nd of August 2023. And he's asked, the premise had a range of dried mushrooms for sale. Is that right? He said yes. And they said, again, two of them were an eating type of mushroom. One was shiitake, one was a black fungi type mushroom, quite common. And they said, he's asked, did they both appear to have commercially packaged mushrooms for sale, as well as what they see in the photograph? So the photograph was just of commercially made mushrooms. And he said, yes, they did. And they said, now what we see in the photographs, what, if anything, were you told about the source of these mushrooms? He said, they had the bulk bag there that they had repackaged from. I was able to identify that they were from a brand of Plum Blossom in that they were repackaged into a smaller bag. And they asked, so you said they had a bulk bag, so they had larger bags of these products, is that right? And he says, that's correct. And they said on site they repackaged to a smaller bag. He says that's correct. And they said, what is the purpose of that for sale? And he says that's correct. And they said, did you send these back to the health department that you were liaising with? And he says, yes. And the photos were a close up bag of shiitake mushrooms. around 100 grams, and the second photo was mushrooms in the on display in the store. And they said, "Did you ask about the supplier details and the repackaging of those products?" And he said, "Yes." And they said, "What was the discussion?" So he says, "I spoke to them about the products and where it's coming from, and they showed me the bulk bag to show that they were repackaged from a bulk lot. And I asked them, 'Why are you repackaging?' But they said basically customers only want smaller amounts, not bulk amounts. So it's much more sellable, I guess, in a smaller package. And that brand didn't provide them with smaller packaging. So that's why they did it that way." And they ask, "The bulk bag that you observed, was that commercially branded?" And he says, "Yes." They said, "Did you ask if there had been any changes in supplier since April?" And he says, "I did." And then they ask, "What was their answer?" And he says, "It was no." And they said, Did you ask if they had anyone to try and sell them mushrooms that were not commercially produced?" He said, "I asked the question, I did." And he says, "Their answer, it was a no." So, and so the photos that he took of these mushrooms, they ended up going back to the health department. The following day, on August 3, they asked him, "Did you receive an email from the person that you were liaising with that she had shared the photographs with the lady who had purchased or said she had purchased the mushrooms, and that she confirmed the packaging style was correct, but it was about half the size of the packages that you had sent in the photos?" And he says, "That is correct." And they asked, "But the photos of the shop didn't look familiar to her. And the mushrooms she bought were sliced and not whole. So sliced mushrooms." And he says, "That's correct." And they said, he went on to visit another store called Little Korea, and they said, "Did you observe mushrooms on sale at that premises?" And he said, "I did." And they said, "Did you observe specifically sliced shiitake mushrooms for sale?" And he says, "I did." And they said, "You have taken photos of all the products. I'll just ask you, globally, you took photos of every product at every store that you saw was mushroom related?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "I think in total," they ask him, "in total, something in the order of 340 photographs that you took?" And he says, "Yes." And they said, "Both the products themselves, but also displays and the stores as a whole." We didn't get to see them. They were not entered into evidence like the entire 340 photos. They said they wouldn't have time to do that. It's a lot of like evidence to put into you know, to the jury and things like that. So they did not do that. But they said, "Did you speak to the proprietor or manager at Little Korea?" And he says, "Yes." "Did you ask them if they changed their supplier since April?" He says, "Yes." "And their response," he says, "was no." And had anyone tried to sell them mushrooms that were not commercially produced? The answer was no. Did they have any products they had repackaged or appeared to have repackaged any mushrooms? No. So this continues. They go to a bunch of different stores, including another one in Oakley called Oakley Fresh Fruit Barn, and they ask the same things, that there was no mushrooms that were in a clear bag, but they were in manufacturer's packaging. But they found some porcini mushrooms. It was in a 10-gram bag, and they said, but it was in commercial packaging. Asked if there was any change in supplier in April 2023, they said no. Had they had anyone trying to sell them mushrooms that were not commercially sourced? No. And I went to another one in Oakley, which was called Pacific Asian Oakley, and they said they only found mushrooms that were in manufacturer's packaging at this particular store. They said one bag of products that fit the description of porcini or shiitake sliced mushrooms. He said yes, but it appeared to have come from commercial packaging. He says correct. They said, had they had any change in supplier since April? No. And they asked, had they had anyone trying to sell the mushrooms that were not commercially produced? No. Uh, and they said, did that complete your investigation in Oakley? He says, correct. So he also goes to um, Clayton and Mount Waverly, and they don't really find anything. So yeah, same questions. Is it commercially packaged? It was commercially packaged. Had they had any change in supplier? No. And this continued for just about every store that he went to. None of them had, except for the one that rebagged mushrooms. None of them had anything that matched the description that they were looking for. So that was the majority of his evidence today was his investigation into stores in the surrounding area where they might have mushrooms, but it didn't really come up with anything at all. So yeah, so what else do we have? Unfortunately, today was another one of the days where we had quite a bit of talking and evidence, but we had a lot of legal stuff as well. We had a lot of legal, uh, court things that happen. And they've been this week in particular, we've had a lot of that. So the evidence time during the day has been quite smaller than some of the other weeks, like week 2, week 3, where we had a lot of witnesses throughout the day. These legal things that happen throughout court tend to shorten the day for witness statements. So but that is to be expected, I think, when you get this deep into a trial. You're talking possibly week 5 next week if you go by just the weeks we've been there. And it will be, what is it? Tomorrow's day 18. Monday would be day 19 and Tuesday day 20. So by the time we get to Tuesday, it'll be a 20 workday trial, and it'll be about 5 weeks in just week to week. So we're getting quite far into it now. Where we're they only scheduled to go for 6 weeks, and even then they were hoping not to use all that time. But next week will be week 5, so we are getting quite far into it now. Um, I just want to see if there's anything from Troy's evidence that I need to tell you. So he visited 5 stores in Oakley, 4 in Mount Waverly, and 5 in Clayton, a total of 14 stores. And that he, yeah, just that they didn't find very much that fit the description. The ones they did find were in commercially packaged sort of, mushrooms, ones that you would get from a manufacturer, not from anyone homegrown, or the store didn't grow their own somewhere and then repackage them. They could only find commercially grown things. Let me see. I think we did that, and then we did the Facebook messages. Yes. I think that is about it. Am I missing one? At the beginning of the day. All right. Hold on. Uh, Nicole, I won't bring your message up on screen just due to the nature of it, but I'll give you the answer yes. Yes to that. Yes. That's all I can say though. I'd say there was, but that's not what they were really sort of looking for. I think they were looking for well, I think they were looking for anything that could be even I guess even fresh as long as it hit the sort of prerequisites that they were looking for. It had to be like homemade cellophane packaging. So it was described as cellophane clear plastic that these mushrooms were in. So it sort of had to hit these certain requirements. Cellophane packaging, homemade label with some sort of printer label on it, and then sliced mushrooms, either porcini or shiitake. That was sort of what they were looking for. So, all right, and then we did this one. We did some of that one. So, okay, I want to take you to the BM, the b- the the BM evidence. I don't mean to laugh, but it is a somewhat interesting topic, I guess. Let me go down here. So this was actually our lady, first lady, no, first witness that we had today, and her name is I think it's Mayrum. I just want to double check. It's Mayrum. Yeah. Okay. So her name is Mayrum Sespon, and she's a registered nurse, and she was employed at Gippsland Southern Health, and that she's a registered nurse and a clinical nurse. And they said she had been employed by Gippsland Health since May of 2020, and that she was rostered to work on the 31st of July 2023, and she started at 7 a.m. and she worked at the Leongatha Hospital. So there we go. And at the time when she started work that day, she received a handover in relation to the care of Heather and Ian Wilkinson. They say shortly after that handover, the nurse in charge, a nurse called Emma, told her that she had Chris Webster, that's Dr. Chris Webster, on the phone, and they spoke on loudspeaker. And Dr. Webster mentioned that they needed to organize the transfer for the Wilkinsons as he received a phone call from Dandenong Hospital that they might have ingested death cap mushroom. So they needed to be given some IV antibiotics and the NAC. So NAC treatment, which is a liver protection. So that's a thing they do to help people more often in paracetamol poisoning, but can be used in any type of situation where a tonic is needed to protect the liver. So there you go. And they said that they were in the ward at this point. Then they were transferred down to urgent care for closer monitoring. And she says after the phone call, they went to Ian and Heather's room with the nurse in charge. The nurse in charge was the one who explained to them that they needed to be moved to urgent care to be more closely monitored and that they will be transferred to Dandenong Hospital. At that point, they did not explain. They thought it was Dr. Chris Webster would be the best person to explain to them why it was happening. And so they moved them into the urgent care. And they say at this point, the care for Heather ceased at this point, and they said yes. And they said another nurse was looking after Ian at the time. And they said, I just want to ask you about seeing Erin Patterson on that day. On 31st of July, you saw her that day, is that right? And Nurse Sespin says, yes, I initially saw her about roughly around 8 o'clock in the morning because I was informed that she was presenting because we were really focused on giving care with Heather at the time. She says, I just saw her in my peripheral vision while attending to Heather, but I didn't have any interaction with her at that time. And they said, at that stage, was she just sitting down? And they said, yes. And they said, across from the nurse's station, is that right? And she says, that's right. Anyway, this is just before we're told that that Erin goes away for a period of time and that she would return in half an hour, but she doesn't. She ends up coming back at around 9:48 a.m. in the morning, and they talk about it here, and they say, "Let me get down here into." Let me. I want to go down to this bit. Hold on. Okay. They say here, while you were attending to Erin Patterson after she represented to the hospital after already going there a first time, did you observe her go to the toilet? And Nurse Sespin says, yes. She said that she was going to the toilet, and then I told her that we needed to catch the bowel motion just so that we could monitor her bowel output and get a sample from it. And they ask, okay, how do you do that? And she says, so we have a pan of which we call a witch's hat. So it's basically like a witch's hat, but flat at the bottom, like inverted. We put it on the toilet seat. So it's like it only covers half of the toilet seat. So if you're going to collect a urine sample, you put it in like the front of the toilet. And if you're going to collect a bowel motion, then you put it at the back or backwards at the toilet seat. And they say when you're monitoring a patient's output, bowel output, you record that on a chart. Is that right? And she says that is correct. And that is called a bowel chart. And she says correct. And they show an exhibit to the jury, and it is Erin Patterson's bowel chart for when she is in hospital. Okay, stay with me. And they say, so we all see it, it gets presented to the jury, and they say, you recognize this is the bowel chart in relation to Erin Patterson on the 31st of July 2023. And she says, yes. And they say, the handwriting on that chart, whose handwriting is that? And she says, that is mine. And they say, okay, now the first entry we have is 10 a.m. Is that right? And she says, correct. And they say, so does this record the first time that Erin went to the toilet whilst you were attending to her? And she says, that is correct. And they say, so the entry on the table there has entries for an amount and then the letter M. What does that stand for? And she says it stands for medium. And then it says consistent or consistency L. What does that stand for? And she says liquid. And then she's asked, the first time that she went to the toilet, did she report to you whether or not she had any output, be it a bowel motion or urine? And Nurse Hespin says she did mention that it was a bowel motion. And she says, when I was about to collect it, she did mention that it looks like a wee, but it was a bowel motion. And they said, is that what she said? And Nurse Hespin says, yes, that's what she said. And they say, okay, then you recorded one at 10:04. There's another entry, is that right? And she says, that is correct. And they say, so 4 minutes after the first one. And they say, yes. And they said, what does that represent? And Nurse Sespin says, so for the amount, it's medium. And for the consistency, again, it's liquid. And they say, so this is the second time she went to the toilet. Is that what it's indicating? And they said, yes, that is correct. And they said, can you explain the circumstances of how that occurred? Did she come back from the first trip to the toilet? And Nurse Sespin says, yes, so I told her that every time she goes to the toilet, just let me know. So after that, she goes, so after she goes, I can have a look. And she says, so she did mention she was going to go to the toilet again. So I had the pan ready every time. And they said the next one, the third entry is for 10:06 a.m. And they said that is correct. And they ask her, so the third trip to the toilet, did she tell you she was going to the toilet? And she says, yes, correct. And they said the same thing, and she says the same. Did you have a look at the output? Nurse Sespin says, yes, it was the same. And he said, did it look any different to the first two? She says, no. Most of all, her bowel outputs are the same. And then they say, and again, you have noted an amount. On this occasion, you have noted S for small. And she says, small, yes, that is correct. And they said, consistency, L for liquid. And she says, liquid, correct, yes. And they said, during the course of your care, you not only make notes in this bowel chart, but you also make a progress notes. Is that right? And she says, that is correct. And they said, now looking at the left-hand side of the page, date July 31st or 31st July 2023, time 9:50. And is that your first entry? And she says, yes, that is correct. And they say, it says PT, so patient. And she says, correct. And it says, came back to UCC, which is Urgent Care Center. And she says, correct. And she says, currently talking with Dr. Chris Webster. Is that right? And she says, correct. And that was in the triage window. And they say here, um, the next entry is 10 past 10. And she says, yes. And they said, 10 past 10. Okay. What have you written there, please? And she says, so patient went to the toilet 3 times. And it says, since arrival, stool sample taken, still watery, yellow clear in color, looks like urine, but patient stating it is stool, no blood, and no blood. Patient currently on the phone with police to grab mushrooms at home. And then they say if they go back to the bowel chart, there's another entry, a fourth entry at 10:15, and Nurse Sespin says yes. And they say the amount is M for medium and consistency is L for liquid. Is that right? And she says yes. They said, did you make an observation of that output? She says, yes, I did. They said, was it any different to the first 3 that you had seen? And she says, no, it's the same. So there you go. That was some of Nurse Sespin's evidence. And they go on to say here, did you have a further conversation with Erin and take a history about her presentation at hospital? And Nurse Sespin says, yes, so I asked her what the history was. So she mentioned that on July 29th in the evening, she started to get nauseated and feel sick. And they said, did she say what time? And Nurse Sespin says, no, she did not mention. She goes, I'm not quite sure. I think she mentioned it was in the evening. And then they said, but I'm not quite sure about time. She did mention that Sunday, which is July 30, she mentioned that she had diarrhea all day and that it settled in the evening, and then diarrhea came back on July 31st, which then is when she presented. And they asked, so she had diarrhea all day on Sunday, the 30th of July. And she says, yeah, correct. And they say, all right, in terms of her appearance, how did she appear to you emotionally? And Nurse Sespin says, she was distressed and emotional while including the thought of her kids, getting stressed out about this, but also because of her symptoms. She was just saying that she feels unwell. She's got this pain and she's been having these loose bowel motions. She was just emotional about that she feels unwell. And they said at some stage the police call the unit. Is that right? And she says that is correct. And they say, firstly, you advised them that she had represented to the hospital. And she says, yes. And they were at the house. Is it the case that Dr. Foote overheard the conversation? And she says, correct. Yeah, she knew that I was talking to one of the police. She mentioned that because I told Dr. Foote that they were at the house. So she mentioned that if they can get a sample of the mushroom or any part of the meal, and they said while they're at the house. So I went to Erin and asked her if she was okay with that, with the police going in her house and getting some of the meal, and she was okay with that one. And I passed her the phone to talk to police, and she was instructing them as to where they can find it and to what it was in. And they say, did you hear what she said about that and about what they might find and where they find it? She says, yes. So she mentioned that they would be in a bin, and she mentioned it was the food scraps from the meal and that it would be inside a Woolies paper bag in the bin. And they ask, did she say anything about the food scraps in particular? And Nurse Cespin says, well, she mentioned that the food scraps was the meal that she scraped from the kids because the kids don't eat mushroom. And they say, so she's saying that she was just saying that the kids don't eat mushroom. So she scraped some of it and put it in a bag and threw it in the bin. And they say, okay. And that's then they will find it if they were to look for it. And she says, that's correct. They say, now after this period, did she go to the toilet a further time? I think I've already covered four with you. Is that right? She says, yeah, you have covered four. And they say, okay, so a further fifth time, is that right? And they say, that was at 11:50 a.m. Is that right? And they say, that is correct. They say, then in the bowel chart, you have noted S for small and consistency L for the liquid. Is that right? And she says, correct. Again, did that appear to be same or different to the previous bowel motion? And she said it's the same as the previous bowel motions. So there you go. Um, there you go. There's some of the information about probably too much information about bowel motions. So there you go. I'm just reading some of your comments. Nurses are tough. Yeah. The one day I'll tell you about what we see and hear at court a bit more about what happens actually what we see. Like this is what we hear in that, but there's other things that, you know, we may be able to talk about at a later time. It's lunchtime in the UK. Don't be watching if you're in the UK. If you're in the UK and you're about to get your lunch, then it is not the best time to be talking about that. Hey Renee, how are you? Good to see you. You're late. That's okay. You can catch up. We're almost done. Because of the delays that we've been having, it's been pushing back a lot of this, or like sort of throughout the week, unfortunately. And the last 3 days, yeah, Thursday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, and even Monday, have all had just delays, and it's been pushing some of the witness testimony out further into the day. Today and yesterday was the worst one so far. We didn't get to witnesses until like almost lunchtime, and today wasn't quite as bad, but still some delay. You know, court's supposed to get underway at about 10:30, but we've been getting underway a lot later in the day. So yeah, Sean, I appreciate it. Actually, Sean, I got pizza tonight. So I did get a pizza from you tonight. I actually went and got a giant family size pizza that I'm probably going to eat as soon as I get out of here. So my cats are going crazy. Muffin, hey, I don't know what he's doing. All right. I think that's about it for tonight. I think we did that. Yep, we did the guy who investigated Oakley, Clayton, and Mount Waverly, gave you the rundown on how that works. read out the text messages to you. Yes, we looked at that. We looked at the Cellbrite software. Muffin. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I think we're just about done. So tomorrow there is only court until 1 p.m. Fridays are a half day in the Australian court. So Fridays only go from 10:30 to 1. There'll only be about 2 hours of evidence total, and that's if there's not any delays. If there's any delays, you'll get maybe an hour. So tomorrow will be a really short update, I think. Possibly even shorter than some of the ones this week. Jgaz says, as a USRN, I've never heard of it referred to as a witch's hat, just a hat. I don't know. Maybe different names for different countries. I can't read out that comment, Woman of Steel, but yes, that's right. All right. I think we're done. I think that's it for tonight, guys. There's a cool feature. I wish I could show it to you. There's a thing, if we go like that, I don't know if it's see, you can just see the little chat in the corner of the screen now. We've got a new option. I can't really use it right now, but on the weekend we'll have two late shows for you where we just talk about true crime from the week, and there's a lot of things to talk about, including I found out today that baby Moses' mother, they released the interrogation video for her, and you see her admit to killing her child. So we'll talk about that on the Late Show on Friday night in the USA, Saturday afternoon for Australia, and then we'll have a second episode Saturday night, USA time, Sunday afternoon, Australian time. So we'll be doing a lot of USA true crime, catching up on cases that we haven't been able to do because of the trial. And these shows normally run a lot longer. We normally try and do like 2 hours, 3 hours, really long shows. And yeah, so that's it. We've almost got week 4 in the books. We're almost done. What will week 5 bring us? I have no idea. I don't know, but I hope we're sort of seeing the finish line. That's what Ping is hoping. I'm hoping the finish line is in sight. How soon are we going to get to that finish line? I have no idea. I really don't. I'm not even I'm not even playing like games with you. I really have no idea. You know, the different things that happen in trials that push things out, and they might be like, hey, we're going to do this and that, and then things don't happen, and then they change things around, and stuff happens a day later, and Tuesday is Thursday, and Friday is Monday, and week 2 is week 5. Like, that's just how trials go. There's always things that change. There's always things that get changed. There's always things that come up. It's a live trial, so there's things on the prosecution, there's things on the defense, there's things with the justice, there's things that happen with witnesses and stuff. It's just never ending the amount of things that can subvert a trial on timing. So it'll get to verdict when it gets to verdict, whenever that might be. It could be next week, it could be the week after, it'll be whenever we get there. That's the message I have taken. We'll get there one day. One day we'll get there. And then we'll be in Verdict Watch. And during Verdict Watch, I will not be at the courthouse. Apparently, they're not opening it during verdict, as far as I know. I asked around, and apparently they're not opening it during the verdict time. So verdict while the jury is deliberating, we have to be at home. So I guess that's to give the jury space and time and, to let them do their job, let them do their civil duty. So we're going to be at home until we get notice that there is a verdict, and then I'll be online. As soon as I hear that verdict, I will be online within moments of hearing it. As soon as I can hear like what the counts are and what the result is, I will be online. I will have a live show ready to go, and it'll sit there throughout the verdict process. And as soon as I know, I'll go live like that, and you guys will be some of the first in the world to hear what that verdict is. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, you should do that because you will get a notification when that verdict live show goes live. You'll get a message saying Ping is live with the verdict. So if you haven't subscribed, I would appreciate it. To all the new subscribers, I think we're getting closer to like 200 or so new subscribers. I appreciate it. It's been a long trial so far. All the new people, I really appreciate you all, and I'm glad you found the channel. I'm glad it took the biggest trial in Victorian recent history, but I'm glad you found it eventually. We've only been here for 2 years. That is not a long amount of time. That's a short amount of time. It's okay. Um, yeah, that's it. And we are heading to the Samantha Murphy trial after this. After we get done with Erin Patterson, I am looking to head out to the Samantha Murphy, the person who is accused of killing her. I'm looking to go to that Supreme Court trial as well. A little bit later this year, I think in a month or two, and we'll be heading out to that one as well. All right, let me check. Let me check a couple of things before we go and get you out of here for your Thursday night. Sean, that's very funny. Sean sent me a donation that just has a bunch of different food emojis. I appreciate it because I bought so much food today in the afternoon. I was at the shop and I was like, I'll eat all of this. I'll have one of those and I'll eat that. And I'll have three of those and I'll eat that. And then I went to get a pizza and I'll eat that. I'll eat it all. So I appreciate it, Sean. Sean's bought me lunch, I think, almost every second day of the trial, something like that. So I appreciate it. Hey, Marco. Marco says, so the cop who killed, well, it was his ex lover, ex partner, and then moved their bodies from their apartment. I don't know. I don't know. I'll probably cover it as it happens, but actually going to the Supreme Court, probably not because I'm not in Sydney. But I mean, I will cover the updates every day, but I won't be live in the courthouse for it like I am with the Erin Patterson trial because I don't think I can get access for it. I can check into it. I don't know if I can or not, but I can try get access. But it's different in every state. Every media team works differently. They may give me access, they may give me no access. It depends, but at a minimum, I will give the updates every day as we go through it. So I'll see. If I can, I will. If I can't, I won't. That's a good way of explaining it. But yeah, it's good to see you, Marco. Hey, thanks for the email. I appreciate it the other week. That helped me out a lot. It's appreciated. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what they're talking about. All right, that's it. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to enjoy my half day tomorrow, which will be well. It is well received by me. I'm like, oh my god, it's a half day tomorrow. We don't have to do court all day, so I am going to enjoy my half day off tomorrow and relax in the afternoon for a Friday afternoon. Maybe have a beer. That's what I'm going to do. I might need one at the end of this particular trial. I love you all. I will be back tomorrow, but it'll be a very short show, and it'll probably be on early afternoon because we get out so early. I can do my notes very quickly. Um, yeah, but it'll only be about 20 minutes. It'll be very, very quick. And then I'll see you for the late shows over the weekend. Over the weekend, and you'll get the 2 3 hour live shows that we like to do on the weekends that are about midnight Eastern in the USA, about 3 p.m., 2 p.m. Australian time on the East Coast. So if you're on the East Coast, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, something like that, it's around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I will see you then on the weekend. And one more show tomorrow for day 18, but it'll be very, very quick. All right. Love you all. Have fun out there. And enjoy your weekends. Enjoy your Friday. TGIF. I'll talk to you then when I have a freshly cracked beer. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a beer tomorrow for the live show, maybe. Maybe. We'll see. All right. Love you all. Peace out. Thank you to all the new fans and subscribers. I appreciate it. We put in a lot of work on this channel to bring you this type of content. It's basically a full-time job going to court every day. So thank you to those people. Good night, everyone. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Peace.